All right, let's dive into this article all about logo design case studies. You guys sent this over, and I gotta say, I'm pretty excited to dig into it.
Yeah, case studies, they're kind of a secret weapon that not all designers are aware of.
So this designer, they're saying that these case studies are not just like a portfolio,
Yeah.
showing off a bunch of pretty logos. It's like a whole story.
Yeah.
Taking the client along and showing them like the strategy behind it all, the why for all the different design choices.
Yeah, and the thinking that goes into it.
And they say that designers that really nail these case studies can actually like charge way more. They said something like 65% more, which
85%.
yeah, pretty wide.
That's a pretty big claim. I wonder, I mean, it makes you think, do those designers just have their act together in other ways too? Maybe it's not just the case studies. Maybe they're just better at communicating in general.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. I bet it's a combo. But you're right, it highlights how important it is to show what you know and how much value you bring. It's like you could be the most talented designer, but if you can't explain that to a client,
Right.
they're not going to get it.
It's all about presentation.
Totally.
So what goes into a really great case study? Well, this article breaks down the framework. It's got all the usual suspects: project overview, objectives,
Yeah,
research, design process,
of course.
and then the results.
And one thing that really stands out to me is how much they emphasize that research phase.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're not messing around.
No, they don't.
They're doing competitor analysis, target audience personas,
Mood boards.
the whole 9 yards.
Yeah.
It's like they're design detectives.
Yeah, it's true. And it's fascinating how they use visuals to make that research more tangible. Like, imagine you're creating a logo for a new coffee shop. You could use a visual matrix to see how it stacks up against the competition.
Oh, I like that. One axis could be like modern versus traditional, and the other could be upscale versus affordable.
So you can really see where that new coffee shop fits in.
Exactly, yeah. And you can see where the gaps are.
Yeah.
And what kind of visual identity would help them stand out.
I love how visual that is. And, and it's not just for design, right? I mean, you could use that kind of matrix in any field where you're trying to figure out where you fit in.
Absolutely, yeah. Now, another thing they focus on is documentation. And I don't just mean keeping track of emails and revisions.
Yeah.
It's about capturing those light bulb moments.
Like those aha moments.
Yeah, the flashes of insight that drive the best creative decisions.
They suggest like actually keeping a project journal, which when I first read that, I was like, a design diary. But then they told this story about a client who wasn't impressed with the logo at first. But then they saw the designer's whole thought process all laid out, and they totally changed their mind.
That's interesting. You know what I think is so powerful about that? Is it helps the client see the whole journey. It's not just about the final product. They understand the iterations, the problem solving that went into it. And that makes your work so much more valuable.
Totally. And this is where it gets really cool. They see revision rounds, not as a chore, but as like storytelling gold.
I like that.
They actually see it as a chance to show the client that you're listening, that you're collaborating, you're using their feedback to make the design even stronger.
I see. So it's like you're saying, hey, client, look how I'm using your feedback to create something even better.
Exactly.
I actually use my graveyard file in a similar way.
Your what?
My graveyard file. It's where I keep all my unused concepts.
Right.
It's not just a place to dump old ideas. I actually use it to show potential clients the depth of exploration that goes into my work.
Oh, that's smart.
It's like I'm saying, look, I didn't just come up with one idea. I explored every avenue to get to the best solution.
I love that. And speaking of showcasing your work, this article also digs into the presentation side of things, how to structure your case study and design it visually to make it really pop.
Yeah, it's all about creating that visual hierarchy, guiding the viewer's eye through the story.
Right.
You want to highlight the key choices and the why behind them. It's about showing, not just telling.
Show your work.
Exactly.
And they even tell this story about a restaurant rebrand where they started the presentation with a picture of the old rundown sign. And it just grabs your attention right away. Like, oh, this is going to be good.
Yeah, that's a great example of visual storytelling.
Totally. And of course, even with amazing visuals, you still got to have strong writing. They talk about keeping the language clear and concise, focusing on the problem you're solving for the client.
Right. You don't want to get bogged down in design jargon.
Yeah, no one wants to hear about kerning and Bezier curves.
Right. They just want to know how you're going to make their business better.
Exactly.
And the article suggests using analogies to make those technical concepts more relatable.
Oh.
Like instead of saying, I chose a geometric sans serif font, you can say something like, We wanted a font that felt as sleek and efficient as the technology this company creates.
Oh, that's so good. It really paints a picture and connects the dots between the design choice and the brand.
Exactly.
They also talk about backing up your design choices with insights about the target audience. It's not enough to just say, I like this color palette.
Yeah.
You got to explain why that palette will resonate with the people you're trying to reach.
It shows you've done your homework and that your decisions are strategic, not just based on personal preference.
So we've talked about storytelling, research, documentation, presentation, and writing. But what about the bottom line? How to show the impact your work has had?
That's where the data comes in. They're all about data-driven result, going beyond just how it looks, and showing how the logo performs in the real world.
And they get really creative with the metrics they track. Like for a coffee shop rebrand, they didn't just look at sales. They looked at how many people were taking pictures with the new logo, how many times the coffee cups showed up on social media.
Interesting.
Like thinking outside the box.
Yeah, it tells a story. It
Yeah.
shows the logo is actually creating buzz.
Totally. All right, there's still so much more to cover in this article, so many great tips and insights. Buckle up, we're just getting started.
You know, one thing that often gets overlooked is the whole technical side of presenting case studies online. Like, you could have the best content in the world, but if your website is slow or your case studies aren't optimized for mobile, you could be losing out on clients.
Oh, yeah, I've been there. Spent hours on this beautiful case study and then realized the images were so huge it took forever to load.
Oh, yeah.
Total design fail.
The author actually shares a similar story. They were losing potential clients because their case study pages took so long to load.
Oh,
It's
no.
like they were showcasing their work. In a dimly lit room,
Ouch. Yeah, so what did they do?
they got obsessed with optimization.
Okay.
They compressed images, used the right file formats,
Yeah.
and even implemented lazy loading.
Lazy loading.
Yeah.
That's that.
Basically, it only loads the images that are visible on the screen. So as you scroll down, the rest of the images load. It really speeds things up, especially for image-heavy case studies.
That's so smart. Okay, lazy loading. I'm writing that down. Anything else?
Well, mobile optimization is huge, too. So many people browse on their phones. You got to make sure your case studies look amazing on those small screens.
Right, nobody wants to be pinching and zooming to read a case study.
Exactly. It's about making the experience enjoyable, no matter what device someone's using.
Okay, so beyond just showcasing your work to potential clients, they also talk about using case studies for like educational purposes,
Oh, yeah.
which I thought was interesting.
It is. It is. Case studies can be like little master classes,
Yeah.
teaching people about design principles and process.
They mentioned creating different kinds of case studies for different audiences, like quick ones for potential clients just browsing,
Right.
and then more in-depth ones for clients who are seriously considering working with them.
It's like having different levels of access.
I like that. And they even create case studies specifically for speaking engagements and workshops.
That's a great idea.
So cool. Using their work to share their knowledge
Yeah.
and contribute to the design community.
Speaking of community, one thing that really resonated with me was how much they emphasize embracing mistakes
Yeah.
and using them as learning opportunities.
Oh, yeah. Like not being afraid to show your vulnerabilities
Yeah.
and share those design fails.
Exactly. It's so easy to get caught up in presenting this perfect image.
Right. But everybody makes mistakes.
Exactly. And they even encourage designers to document those aha moments when they find a solution after making a mistake.
Like turning those facepalm moments into valuable lessons.
Exactly. It's about creating this culture of learning
Yeah.
and continuous improvement
Yeah.
where everyone can learn from each other.
Now I know what you're thinking. Okay, this is great for designers, but what about me? I'm not in a visual field.
Right.
But here's the thing. These principles apply to any profession.
Absolutely.
It doesn't matter if you're a writer or a marketer, a developer, an accountant.
Anyone.
Every project has a story
A process.
and an impact.
There's a case study waiting to be told.
Totally. So let's say you're a writer working on a marketing campaign. You can document your research, your brainstorming, your different drafts.
The feedback you receive.
You can track the performance of the campaign.
Yeah, like website traffic, leads, social media engagement.
And those aha moments, they're important for everyone.
Absolutely.
Like maybe you stumble upon this amazing insight during your research.
Or come up with the perfect headline.
Document those breakthroughs.
Exactly.
Or if you're a software developer, you can document your code,
Your testing process,
the bugs you encounter.
how you fix them,
You can show off how the software works, its features and benefits.
and track those metrics. User adoption, customer satisfaction.
So no matter what you do, There's a story to tell, a process to showcase, an impact to measure.
It's about thinking about your work in a more strategic way.
Yeah, looking at the bigger picture
Understanding the why behind the what.
and being able to explain the value you bring.
Exactly.
So let's connect this back to you, the listener. Think about your own work, your projects, your accomplishments. How can you apply these principles of storytelling, documentation, and showing results?
What stories can you tell?
What processes can you showcase?
What impact can you demonstrate?
Even if you don't create formal case studies, just thinking about your work this way can be so valuable.
It's about becoming more mindful,
More intentional.
more strategic.
And remember, mistakes are inevitable.
Embrace them.
There are opportunities for learning and growth.
Sometimes the best lessons come from the projects that didn't go exactly as planned.
They actually talk about a project that went through tons of revisions and got super delayed.
Oh, wow.
But instead of trying to hide it, they documented everything.
Interesting.
They explained the reasons for the delays and the steps they took to minimize the impact on the client.
And how did the client react?
They were actually really appreciative of the honesty and the ownership.
Wow, that's great.
It's a good reminder that strong client relationships aren't just about delivering a perfect product.
Right.
It's about communication, transparency,
And working together to find the best solution.
even when things get tough.
Exactly.
That's a perfect example of how transparency can actually build trust.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about a specific example from the article that really stood out to me.
Okay.
The project for the local brewery. Remember that one?
Yeah.
They went all out with the documentation.
They even included photos of themselves at the brewery wearing hairnets.
I loved that. They really immersed themselves in the client's world.
They did.
And they didn't just capture the fun stuff, they documented how they tested the logo visibility on different beer bottle colors. So much attention to detail.
It's those little details that make a case study come alive.
Yeah, and the client can connect with the story.
And the results were amazing. That case study alone brought in 3 similar clients.
Wow, that's awesome. Proof that a well-crafted case study can be a powerful marketing tool.
It really is.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit and talk about the writing.
Okay.
They emphasize clear and concise language.
Yes.
Focusing on the business problem. And avoiding all that design jargon.
Right, because you're talking to a client, not another designer.
Exactly. They want to know how you're going to help their business.
Exactly.
They don't care about fancy design terms. And they give this great example of how to translate a design decision into client-friendly language.
Oh. Okay.
Instead of saying, I implemented a monochromatic color scheme, they said something like, we chose varying shades of blue to create a sense of trust and stability, like the calming effect of the ocean.
Oh, I like that.
It takes a technical concept and makes it relatable.
And it shows you understand the emotional impact of design.
Totally. All right, let's talk results. They're all about data-driven results.
Yeah, it's not enough to say the logo looks good.
Right.
You have to show how it's performing.
And this is where it gets tricky. How do you measure the impact of a logo?
Right. It's not always straightforward.
They recommend getting creative with the metrics. Like for that coffee shop, they tracked how many Instagram photos were taken with the new logo.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
It's a smart way to measure the buzz.
It is.
And they talk about client testimonials, but they emphasize getting specific quotes.
Right, not just vague praise.
Quotes that show your work made a real difference.
Yeah, that's important.
And here's a final thought. They suggest following up with clients 6 months or a year later
Oh, interesting.
to see how the brand has evolved.
I like that.
It shows you care,
Yeah,
and you get valuable insights.
that you can use for future projects.
It's a win-win. It's like you planted a seed and then you come back later to see how it's grown into this amazing plant. But speaking of amazing things, this article actually goes into some practical stuff
Yeah.
about presenting your case studies online.
You know, it's funny. A lot of designers, they create these stunning visuals for their case studies, but then they totally neglect the technical side.
Right, like they spent all this time polishing the car but forgot to put gas in it.
Okay.
They've got these great case studies, but no one can even see them because their website is so slow.
The author learned that the hard way.
Yeah, we talked about that. Potential clients were bouncing off their site.
Yeah, it was bad.
So what kind of technical tips do they have? Because honestly, that's something I struggle with.
Well, image optimization is huge. You got to compress those images. But without losing quality,
Right.
use the right file formats. And they even talk about lazy loading.
Lazy loading.
Yeah, have you heard of that?
It sounds familiar, but remind
So basically, it only loads the images. that are visible on the screen.
Yeah.
As the person scrolls down, the rest of the images load.
Oh, okay.
It can really speed up your page load time.
That's so smart. Okay, I'm adding lazy loading to my to-do list right now. What else?
Mobile optimization is super important these days, too.
Yeah.
Everyone's on their phones.
Yeah.
So make sure your case studies look good on those small screens.
Yeah, nobody wants to be pinching and zooming to read a case study.
Exactly.
This should be a good experience for everyone.
No matter what device they're using.
You know, one thing I noticed about the author is how much they talk about sharing your work and your knowledge with the design community.
Absolutely.
They're all about giving back and helping other designers. Remember how they even offer that free case study template?
Yes, that's so generous.
It's like they're saying, here are the tools I use. Now go out and create your own amazing work.
I love that.
And they encourage designers to use their case studies as teaching tools. You know, share their knowledge through speaking and workshops.
It's about lifting each other up.
It's like they're building a design army, armed with powerful case studies.
I love that analogy.
And that reminds me of another thing they talk about, embracing mistakes.
Yes.
They're not afraid to share their own design fails.
And what they learned from them.
It's so refreshing because it's so easy to get caught up in presenting this perfect image.
Right.
But everyone makes mistakes.
That's part of the process.
And they encourage designers to document those moments when they figure out a solution after making a mistake.
Like turning those facepalm moments
Yeah.
into valuable lessons.
Exactly.
It's about transparency and continuous learning.
So we've covered a lot of ground today, from storytelling and documentation to the technical stuff and embracing mistakes.
It's been a great conversation.
But before we wrap up, I want to connect this back to you one last time, the listener.
Yes, because even if you're not a designer, these principles can apply to any field.
Think about it. Every project you work on is a story.
There's a process, a journey.
By documenting that process, you're not just creating a record of your work, you're creating a narrative that shows your skills and your value.
It's a powerful way to communicate.
And when you start thinking about your work in terms of stories and results, it can really elevate everything you do.
So here's our challenge to you, the listener. Start documenting your work.
Even if it's just little notes or screenshots.
It'll help you see your work in a new light.
And don't be afraid to share your stories.
And your accomplishments.
You never know who you might inspire.
Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into logo design case studies.
It's been a great journey.
I hope you found it insightful and inspiring.
And that you'll take some of these tips and create your own amazing case studies.
If you want to learn more, be sure to check out that free template.
We'll link to it in the show notes.
Thanks for joining us.
Until next time.
Keep diving deep, keep learning, and keep sharing your awesome work with the world.